One of the big questions in this country right now is the idea of, I'd say, taxes and the legality of some of our tax systems, and what are some of the alternatives? And here to talk to us about this is Larry Sharpe. He was a Libertarian candidate, now considering some other stuff, but great expert on some of this stuff. And Larry, real pleasure having you on Crossroads.
I am happy to be here. Thank you so much. Yes, taxes. The problem when people talk about taxes, they always assume that when you want to lower taxes, it means you want to hurt the poor and help the rich, right? That's always the assumption they make. And it feels bad.
Don't you want to build roads and build schools?
100%,
how dare you? Yeah.
How bad are you? So I decided, you know what? How about we do both? How about we get people who are wealthy and big companies to pay more without taxes and give better service for the working poor middle class? I'm from New York City. We have lots of bridges and tunnels in New York City. So I said, why don't we lease the naming rights to all of our bridges in New York City? Right? So instead of it being the Triborough Bridge or the RFK Bridge, instead, it's the 3M Bridge or the Kellogg's Bridge or the Colgate-Palmolive Bridge or whatever the case may be, or the Pepsi Bridge. I'm fine with whatever it is. The Google Bridge, doesn't matter. Why would they do that? Well, I want $100 million for a bridge like that. They would say, wait a minute, that's a lot of money. It is. They dropped $20 million for a stadium that they use on the weekends. I'm talking about a bridge that gets mentioned hundreds of times on the radio stations and TV when it comes to traffic reports in a 16 million metro person area. You tell me that's not worth $100 million? Of course it is. How do I know that? Bankers talked to me about it when I was running for governor. Hey, how long's the lease? What are we doing? How does this work? And I was like, yes, you lease the naming rights so the state or the city still owns the property. I'm a business guy. I'm not giving my property up, right? So I'm going to lease the naming rights out. And on top of that, they have to take care of the maintenance. So they take care of the maintenance because we still inspect it. Right now in New York City, bridges still fall down. I'm sorry, in New York State, not New York City. New York State, bridges still collapse. They won't this way because if the bridge goes below a level B down to a C, they lose the contract. Next contract. If you front load the contract, we still get paid up front no matter what. So that's how you front load the contract. It keeps it to where now we get better bridges. The big companies are paying. You might say, Larry, they're going to pay $100 million? These are companies that drop billions of dollars every year in marketing. Billions with a B. $100 million is chump change for them. So we're not going to have a raise in pricing. They're happy to do it. And even better, there's millions of people who cross those bridges. They get to see it. And every piece of, Netflix or Hulu or whatever is the cool movie of the day, they always show the skyline, New York City skyline. They get product placement. Life is good for something like that. And here's the best part. No tolls. Right now, if you cross a bridge in New York City, anywhere from $13 to $18 to cross one bridge. And if you are an owner-operator trucker, oh my God, you're paying per axle. You're dropping $150 to cross a bridge or whatever that is for your axles. You're paying tons of cash to cross the bridge both ways, go back and forth. We end that. The working poor and the middle class are the ones who use the bridges. The wealthy people in New York City already live in Manhattan. They're not crossing bridges. This is a way of getting the people who have more money to pay voluntarily, to lower the tax burden on the average person, and to make life easier for the working poor and the middle class. And we don't have to raise taxes. But I'm not done. You're saying, Larry, wait a minute, you done?
All right, what else you got?
I'm not done. The MTA itself, the actual subway system. At night, the trains only run every other train. So let's change that. Every other train now is a freight train. We can bring freight into the city. You bring freight into the city, less trucks coming into the city, which means less wear and tear on our roads, right? But not just that. Now you have the trains coming in, and who has to build those new trains out? I don't know, Amazon, FedEx, UPS, Google, insert company here. We give them naming rights on the stations. They rebuild the infrastructure, lowers the prices. We get a brand new infrastructure. And now we're getting more stuff into the city cheaper and faster.
Well, it's interesting because this is how things happened originally when it came to like the Transcontinental Railroad and private companies. It used to be the case in America that it was actually private businesses and private enterprise that built a lot of the stuff. The early ferries and stuff like that. That was huge business.
Absolutely.
It was super lucrative business, actually. And businesses competed to get that business because it was so lucrative.
Absolutely. Well, the glory of this is, what people always say is, Larry, you can't do that because then the company will make a bad agreement with the state or city and then they'll renege on the agreement. That does happen. But if it's not a monopoly, meaning anyone can have it if they outbid, if whatever Google or 3M is a bad actor, then someone else gets the contract. Done deal.
And that means, too, that if, for example, let's say that, it's $100 million, something like that if there's demand for it, they're going to buy it. And if
Yep.
there's competition for that demand, even more so.
Absolutely, right? And let's say it's better, it's 110. Let's say I'm wrong, it's only 80 million. Okay, maybe the market only wants 80 million for the bridge. Fine, I got a dozen bridges and tunnels in my city. All of a sudden now I'm paying for my MTA. Now guess what? If I want to have a lower, right now it's about $2.25 to ride a subway. That's basically $5 a day. What if I could lower it to $3 a day? The wealthy aren't using the subway. It's the working poor and middle class use the subway. Do I actually want to help my working poor and middle class? Yes, I do. And I'm a libertarian. Isn't that crazy? We can actually make ways of making it work without having to raise taxes.
I know they also talk about schools and public safety and stuff like this. How do you finance police and schools?
Well, you don't change that. You don't have to even change that, right? The best way you fix the policing is by coming up with a system that allows each local area to, instead of defunding police, to adjust them as they see fit. There are some places in New York State that are totally happy with their police force. Why would I defund them? Why would I adjust them? Why would I reform them if they're happy with their police force? I want you to be policed, not how I want you to be policed. I want you to be policed how your community wants to be policed. That's what I want. So instead I have a plan, it's called my FAQS plan, F-A-Q-S. F is family law, A is active policing, Q is quality of life, and S is social work. And you can break your police force into 4 sections, right? And each one of them should have a civilian or community component. If you have a community component in family law, it could be people like chaplains or local clergy. I don't want a cop who just came from a crime scene to now have to go to where, a husband and wife are yelling at each other. He comes from a crime scene. Where's his head? Not in the right spot. Cops are not gods and they are not monsters. They're just human beings. And then they come, my father was in law enforcement. And all of a sudden now he's got to go into that. No, let a chaplain go there with a cop. Because you know what? Maybe it's a conversation and we can end this. And maybe someone's got to go to jail. But if the cop is there, if someone's getting uppity or has a weapon, the cop can put him down. If not, the chaplain can handle this issue. That's a community group that we can do. And chaplains want this. I brought this idea up to others. They're happy to be involved. They want people involved in the churches again. They want this. They're happy to do this. So that's family law. The second piece is active policing. That is actually hardcore policing. That's what that is. Those people, they need to be more militarized. Family law doesn't have to be militarized. It's a different environment. This part should be more militarized. But more important with this part should have a community group also, because then you don't have the problems with Breonna Taylor or Breonna Taylor or anything like that, because the community says, no, not that apartment, that apartment. We know these guys. But something else happens. If you have a bad guy in a community and you have a community group together, that community can say, we don't want you here. If you're wealthy and you get a warrant for your arrest, they don't kick in your door unless it's for TV purposes, right? It's Roger Stone TV. Yes, 100%. That's good TV. That works. But if you're not good TV, they don't do that. They call your lawyer and say, hey, we got a warrant. When can you surrender your client? That's what actually happens.